Hello there, you are listening to The Screen Queen, where you'll be finding your favorite movie or your favorite television show and learning something new. You'll just have to listen to find out. Here is your host, Samantha Parrish. Hello there and welcome back to the show Screen Team. As always, this is your host on the East Coast, Sammy Parrish, presenting you with The Screen Queen. So it has been quite some time since we've covered an anime, and what would fate hold it? The absolute destiny of my lotto box telling me that the first successful Yuri series is going to be covered on here. Now, Utena has a very interesting history of how it's existed. This was, at its time, considered to be the original first Yuri anime. There's probably been some through the grapevines. However, when you think of the first successful one in a time like the 90s, it sticks out, and it sticks out for all the right reasons, as well as Utena was found to be something more than just a Yuri anime. This is technically the first Yuri anime ever created, but this is also one that it's mainly about the psychology of girls. And boy, did this anime do its homework very well on how to depict what goes through a girl's mind, having to deal with sexuality, peer pressure, manipulation, life choices, the end of the future. They kind of embodied what would be a very fantastical adventure, and they had a lot of psychological elements that felt like hand-in-hand examples. Like, man, it's wild how much this series is more than it was supposed to be. It only took a few episodes to realize this was an anime that was way much more than what it appeared to be, just a magical girl series with two female leads that are implied to be in a relationship. You would never think there was going to be layers of psychology within that, because I certainly didn't think that was coming. So when I began writing this episode, the question I had to ask myself is, what makes people come back to Utena? In a way, this anime almost has a silent appreciation for it. There are people that do see it, but it's not talked about enough. It's almost as if it's like Fight Club, except the rule is you don't talk about it. The rule is you know about it. And when you know about it, oh, there's no way you're going to forget it. It's kind of the way I feel the anime exists as. It's nice to have something that's not talked about enough, but at the same time, it's almost 30 years old. It's about time to talk about it. There's been several people already deciphering what Utena is, and there's many different answers from a series that poses different questions that is okay having different answers every time. So here we go. So before I begin gushing about this anime, I do have to give a discretion warning that this anime does go to some dark places. It's well written about its material, but it could be very triggering for my listeners, and I wanted to give a warning to be very careful. And I will be including time codes just in case anyone needs to skip forward. So here we go. In celebration of Pride Month, this is Revolutionary Girl Utena. So for those that have never seen Revolutionary Girl Utena, there is no shame here. Not everyone is a big anime fan, but for those that want to know about it, here's the plot of it. Because if you look it up, it's it's a little out there. Fun, but a little out there. So we follow a young girl named Utena Tenjo, obviously the main character. But Utena's always had a different way of life. And it's because she's always lived with her same moral and her goal of wanting to be a prince. It's the very thing she talks about. It's what is addressed in the opening, that she vows to be a prince. Because when she was a young girl, her parents died, and it left a hole in her soul, essentially. And a prince came by, gave comfort and the encouragement to keep going, and gave her a rose crest ring. And since then, she has been wanting to find the prince that gave her the rose crest ring, as well as living by this morale of life to give back to others as it was given back to her. Like a pay it forward, essentially, except with, princes. One day, Utena witnesses a domestic altercation between a girl named Anthe and her dumpster fire of dumbassness that is called the fiancé, Sayonji. When Utena intervenes on Anthe's behalf, Sayonji sees it as a challenge as he sees Utena's rose crest, which is the crest of a duelist, which means that is a candidate to fight whoever is the fiancé for the hand of Anthe. Is Utena on board with this? Absolutely not. Is she going to abandon Anthe? Absolutely not. So she goes forward to fight for Anthe's freedom. And then she sees the kind of power that Anthe has, making her a very prosperous future spouse, let's just say. But because Utena is an amazing badass, she fights Sayonji, thus getting Anthe away from him. However, the way the rules of the Rose Bride works is that anybody that duels the current fiance is now the new fiance. So now Utena is the current fiance of the Rose Bride, and other duelists come forward to fight Utena for the prosperous future that Anthe holds. However, as time goes on, something is very off about Anthe, and that is where the real crossroads are going to begin. And that is what is considered the godmother of Yuri, except here's the thing. Most of the Yuri in this Yuri anime is implied. It had the similar treatment that Sailor Neptune and Sailor Uranus had, that they weren't lovers, they were cousins. And thank goodness Utena and Anthe did not get the same treatment. However, there could be an idea, and the idea is all that the creators could do, as they were told that the love between Anthe and Utena will not be shown as explicit, which was kind of what they had all planned out, ready to go. So it had to be self-censored, but the way that it's implied is kind of like their loophole to get around it. But then I also thought about this. This is also an anime that is mostly adolescents and young girls, also young boys, but mostly girls. And there comes a time in every girl's life where questions are proposed and friendships get complicated and the idea of attraction starts to widen a little bit more. So having this an implied lesbian relationship does go hand in hand with the adolescent side of sexuality and trying to figure out what your feelings are. So there's a film I want to reference that will make sense when I talk about it. There's a French film called Water Lilies that also has to do with young girls that are at a crossroads of sexuality and adolescence, similar to two of the themes that Utena has. Looking at those same ideas in Utena, having it implied does make the series stronger, because now you know that they're thinking about it, they know it, they feel it, but ultimately they have to navigate it. And adolescence is all about not knowing what to do at that time of your life, and it's just gonna have to be figured out on its own or in time. And the idea about what the damage looks like in trying to navigate your feelings and emotions is evident with the characters Yuri and Shiori. So the tumultuous relationship between Yuri and Shiori is heartbreaking and unfortunately a norm. Shiori was under the impression that Yuri liked one of their male friends, and Shiori went out of her way in spite to take away the boy that Yuri liked, when it turns out there was no boy. There was always just one girl. But the spite hurt too much for Yuri to have to set the record straight, and didn't feel the need to. Yuri is a character that holds herself with a refinement and disciplined. She's not afraid to have to tell others to live their life without any bullshit, but will she tell herself? Absolutely not. So she's living in absolute misery to still be attracted to someone who hurt her spitefully. Shiori's gaydar was definitely off, for sure, but Shiori herself makes things complicated, wanting answers as to why Yuri wasn't hurt by it. And the answer is not something that she expected, but she also kind of had an inkling of what was going on. Because why else would Yuri have a picture of a girl she hates hanging around her neck in a locket? Now, in the creation of Utena, a major part of her creation comes from the creator himself, Kunihiko Ikuhara, who has said that every one of the characters has an aspect of himself. The aspect he gave Utena is his fear of being a boring adult. Knowing that, it makes a lot of sense for Utena's character after I learned that. So the people responsible for why this anime exists is a team called B Papas. And it's a production group formed by director Kunihiko Ikuhara and Chiho Sato, Shinya Hasegawa, Yoji Enokido, and Yoichiro Oguro. And most of these guys were involved with another anime called Sailor Moon. And looking at Utena, it does have some Sailor Moon looks to it. You look at a couple of the styles of the characters, and it's like, okay, I see your Sailor Moon. But it wasn't until the movie came out that the creators got to be as explicit as they wanted. And after seeing the movie, I think they got their wish granted. If that was their vision, I think they achieved it. The movie will also be playing a big part into the analysis of Utena, but for now, I'm gonna introduce you guys to the show, and then we'll compare and contrast with the movie. So Utena is divided into 3 story arcs. The Student Council Saga, the Black Rose Saga, my favorite, and the Apocalypse Saga. And it is the most perfect roller coaster that goes up, never faltering, hits you hard, goes round and around every single time, and then you end the ride going, oh my god, my stomach doesn't feel okay, and I'm alright with that. But I'd have to say one of the strongest points of this anime would have to be its depiction of manipulation. Manipulation is probably one of the strongest weapons used on this show because it itself can be a weapon. And it's not a great one, it's a hurtful one, and it definitely does strike harder and sharper than a sword. And many of these characters have different ways of manipulation that is depicted in this anime. But it doesn't really start up until the Black Rose Saga. In the Black Rose Saga, literally every one of the characters gets manipulated into fighting Utena. Then there's also the issues with the characters themselves and how they manipulate. One of them being Anthe. Now, Anthe's a bit of a twisted angel where she manipulates without even having to say a word. But it's also unsure how compliant she is, if the manipulation is because her brother told her to do so or if she did it on her own. She's an enigma where it's hard to pinpoint where her personality truly lies. And the biggest of them all, it's gotta be a tie between Akio and Toga. I couldn't see who was more of a manipulative tool than the other, to the point that these 2 manipulative tools just ended up sharing spotlights in the Apocalypse Saga, so I'm just gonna lump them in together. Because obviously they're made for each other with how manipulative and narcissistic they are to get what they want. But these 2 are also very different in the way they manipulate. Toga manipulates to get what he wants, which is kind of the whole point. You use your silver-tongued devil nature to tell someone what they want to hear or make whatever happen to yourself. And Toga does get what he wants for a majority of the time. And when he doesn't get what he wants, he gets into a little temper tantrum thing. He's got to go away for a little bit, and his sister's got to take care of everything because his pride got hurt. But then there's Akio, who is a more darker side of manipulation. There's no lighter side of manipulation, but Akio is at the level of like a cult leader, in my opinion. The way that he thinks the world is just an object to behold, like he's collecting a fucking Pokemon card. And he makes everything sound so gravitas and casual, like, oh, I just sacrificed you, it's no big deal, it's all for the cause. Like, that kind of nature of manipulation. And also, too, for a bonus point, these guys, they both manipulated their sisters for yucky reasons. So, yeah, they both need to take this spotlight. But I would have to say, if there was ever a moment in Utena that really did serve as the top tier moment of manipulation at its core, is in the Black Rose arc. This arc is like the equivalent of having the rug pulled up from under your feet. I'm going to tell you why. There is a character named Soji Mikage, and I think it's one of the most underrated tragic characters, in my opinion. He's basically the most tiniest footnote in the series for how limited it is, but when I tell you what happened to this character and it puts everything through, start to see how this might be one of the scariest cold opens to what is going to be the ultimate fate for Utena. See, Mikage's plan was simple. He was going to have a young boy named Wamiya be the Rose Bride, someone else to take over that power. Wamiya is also gravely ill, which does push the motive for Mikage to get him the better ending he deserved. And that also includes manipulating students to fight Utena to kill Anthy in order for the replacement Rose Bride to be Wamiya. Except here's the thing, Wamiya looks exactly like the prince. So the person that Utena has vowed to find is right here all along, as animes are always convenient with having everyone nearby. But here's the thing. Mikage doesn't entirely manipulate everyone. There is some control to him. In one of the episodes of the Black Rose arc, there is a young man that does come forward with his feelings about Wakaba and how he'd been used and spurned and hurt he felt, and Mikage chose not to have him be a duelist. That this was not the outcome for how he was feeling. For someone like Mikage that's looking for any able body to manipulate so easily, he doesn't let everyone be a duelist. Not everyone is meant for this life. That takes some shred of kindness to not always think of everyone as a pawn on the chessboard. In the end of it all, when he ends up fighting Utena, he ends up learning that there was never a Wamiya. The young boy that he had taken up the crimes for many years ago doesn't even look like the prince. And he was used by Akio all along. And the prince was just Anthy in disguise. When that all comes together, it is a holy shit moment. Mikage is unfortunately the example that serves of how much Akio and Anthy can just ruin someone's life. But the whole point of this anime was getting to see what the powers are like at the end of the world, and, well, nothing's gonna get in the way of the two people that want that more than anyone in the world. The sad thing, though, is that Mikage was selfless the whole time. Dark as his motives were to have to use other people and their emotions against them to go against Utena, he was doing this for somebody else. But since that somebody else was just a mirage connected to Akio and Anthy, there was never any chance that Mikage had. There's no reveal about Mikage's fate. Most of the stuff in the series is implied, but Mikage's is an implied fate. It is not mentioned what happened to him, if he left, if he died. I mean, that man is going to be in a catatonic state that he's been used for 20 years and took on crimes that were not his for someone that wasn't even there. That's a little harsh, man. Seeing the manipulated become the manipulatee, it punches you in the gut. And that is probably one of the most sharpest examples I've ever seen of manipulation. in almost any series. So unlike Mikage and his fate, the rest of the characters, when they've been psychologically had, they do make accurate decisions. It might not be good, but they become mature. Unfortunately, there's not an open shut case when it comes to having to navigate life, and these are all characters that are trying to understand the most confusing time of their life, mixed with this whole magical world in the throw of it all. And as much as I'd love to use Utena, Anthe, Yuri, or Mickey for this example, I'm gonna go with the character Nanami. Nanami was a character I did not expect to change in such a unique way. She came on as the token annoying character that was going to be the pain in the ass. However, as time went on, Nanami started to become a little bit emotionally mature when her brother Toga wasn't around. Because originally everything was my brother and my brother this and my brother that and oh my god, I need my brother. That all changed when Toga went away and she took up his role in the student council and she started making decisions based off of herself and she gave some good reactions. There's a young boy that is also head over heels in love with her named Mitsuru, this little 8-year-old boy that just thinks Nanami is the reason the sun and the stars exist. And of course, Nanami isn't as emotionally receptive to be kind at first because no, she's sort of in a big sibling role like she was in the little sibling role. Now it's like a different feeling. There's a part in the Black Rose arc when Mitsuru is desperate to be an adult so he can hang out with Nanami, and Nanami is the one to say, you should be a child for a while. I like you this way. It takes a lot of emotional maturity to have to tell a young child something that isn't exactly mean, not exactly what he wants to hear, but it is the truth. He is a child and he shouldn't have to grow up so fast, and that's a lot for someone like Nanami to say. Unfortunately, near the end, Nanami does get the biggest shocker of her life to find out that her brother isn't even her brother. When Toga lets the cat out of the bag that Nanami isn't even blood related to her, and actually had to say the most hurtful thing ever for her to find out that this was all a ruse and he was just told to love her and he doesn't think of her the way that she thought of him as close siblings. But it's when Toga decides to go ahead and just let things pursue further, like, hey, we're not siblings. Let's do a little something. Let's do the Sweet Home Alabama. And Nanami refuses. That is still her brother. That will not change. Unfortunately, Nanami still does get had, and she goes into the ring so she can find out who she is because of all the trauma that's going on, that her brother isn't her brother, and she doesn't know who she is anymore. But the fact that she has that moment, like that she has to ask herself, who am I? It was a big moment that doesn't really get too much appreciation. So Yuri is my favorite character for a reason. She will literally shoot herself in the foot, then take her own advice. Yuri almost feels like a bit of a stretch to Utena, where they both are steadfast in their own idealisms, except one is a little bit more lax about life and the other one is going through some issues, so it kind of clouds the judgment. If Yuri didn't have a whole bunch of her feelings holding her back, she'd be unstoppable. But it's her feelings for Shiori that is her greatest desire and her greatest weakness. Unfortunately, with how the dice rolled and in the way that Shiori got things misconstrued in such a hurtful way that it's hard to not ignore it, but hard to move on. It's a troubling situation when someone hurts you so much in a specific way that had nothing to do with it, but the way it, like, the plot had been recontextualized to fit some other narrative, it can hit you faster than a fucking sword to your gut. It's like I said, sometimes the words are sharper more than the swordsmanship in this series. Every time I get invested into Yuri's character, it's like taking a good, hard look in the mirror about myself and seeing the exact same thing that people tell me for years. I'm telling you, a lot of the characters in Utena, they're like a hard reality check about your mental health. Yuri is a good soundboard. She does offer what is good advice to people in the way that they're holding themselves back, and she is basically looking at how someone is in the way of themselves, and yet she's gonna always be in her own way. With Yuri, there is not really a resolve at the end. It does finally get out in the open that there was no Ruka, there was always Shiori, and you kind of have to live with the fact that the two of them are going to have to mend things in their own time once the story is over. It's going to be up to Yuri to have to figure out if she wants to go for Shiori or if she needs to move on. That's just going to have to happen when she's ready for it. Most like the rest of us, when we come to a crossroads, you never know when is it going to be resolved. It's not an easy street, my dudes, and Yuri is one of those idealisms for what it's like to have to get your shit together and let things go and keep moving forward. But with all the characters in Utena, and they all go through very intricate, complicated problems that there's not really an answer for, but that answer has to come in time. Utena does what she can to pull the wool from everybody's eyes and treat everybody in a fair fight, whether it's a opponent, a friend, or a best friend. There's an episode that I want to highlight called Wakaba Flourishing. Wakaba may not have a prominent role in the way that Utena's life has transpired after becoming a duelist and then becoming the fiancé to the Rose Bride, but Wakaba has always respected what Utena has to do. She knows the boundaries, she knows Utena loves her, and whenever Utena is going through something, Wakaba does what a best friend does and looks out for her best interest. At the end of the student council arc, when Utena was about to give up and didn't want to wear her tomboy uniform and just didn't want to be herself, and Wakaba was like, this isn't right, you gotta be you gotta be cool, that's who you are. She does what any best friend would do to give a hard vibe check to their friend. But now the moment has come for Utena to do that for Wakaba. In the Black Rose arc, Wakaba is unfortunately hook, line, and sinkered by Mikage, and she ends up finding Utena after a misunderstanding with one of the guys that she was into, the snothead that Anthe was with. Wakaba's got poor taste in men, but feelings are feelings, and she thought there was a future with him, but there wasn't. And unfortunately, Wakaba ends up becoming so manipulated that she ends up fighting Utena. But Utena doesn't fight her like an enemy. Whenever Utena fights, there is this sportsmanship being a duelist. You know, you honor your opponent, you fight till the end, you give it your all. You let your opponent fall to the ground. But the entire time, Utena doesn't treat this like a regular duelist match. She doesn't even draw her own sword because she doesn't want to strike Wakaba, because Wakaba's not an enemy to be striked. She's just had the wool over her eyes, unfortunately, with her own emotions. And Utena knows that there's something going on and has to be the one to stop Wakaba before there's more damage. Like, we all wish we could have a damage control friend or a damage control situationship, and this is what that looks like when someone does damage control. The way Utena uses Wakaba's own sword to remove the flower and doesn't let her fall like an opponent speaks volumes for how Utena is very much in the realm of what she keeps saying about being a prince. That, to me, is the moment that I feel she sealed the deal. Like, yeah, you're a prince. You got it. You gave the ultimate showmanship to show compassion to a situation and handled it with grace and gravitas. And Wakaba, unfortunately, she had to pick up her own pieces, but the fall wasn't as hard as it could have been if Utena did not cater this to just being a match to save, not a match to win. But all good things must come to an end. After having the student council arc and getting to see Utena grow into a duelist and then seeing what she does in the Black Rose arc to go out of her way to protect Anthe, but now the time has come to figure out what exactly is going on with Anthe, and oh no, man, it's not pretty. I have to give the strongest advisory warning that this section does have to do with the mention of incest. Ugh, hate it. I hate that word. Okay, so anyway, you have been warned. There is a time code afterwards to skip everything. Let's hope I can get through this without getting too sick to my stomach. So as I mentioned earlier, Utena is primarily written with implied messages. The whole base of the show is that it's a Yuri anime, but the Yuri is implied. Well, it also means the incest is implied as well, and that is probably one of the most gracious things that can possibly happen for a series that has heavy material, but you can use your imagination or just know it's a thing that happened behind closed doors. Well, all of that changes in the Apocalypse Saga. For whatever reason, despite the fact that the team was told not to do any explicit female on female in the show, the same cannot be said for how they depicted ancestral relationships. Oh, God. Oh, no. Oh, man. So, on one hand, I mean, I hate to say this, the incest makes sense. If you look at movies like Gladiator or excerpts like Law and Order, there has been siblings that unfortunately do get the idea in their head about something more. With the way that Akio and Anthe have had their history of being extremely codependent on each other, and even seeing how uncomfortably codependent they are upon each other, there is unfortunately incidents like that do happen. When there are siblings that are extremely codependent upon each other, that the boundary gets tested and that boundary gets normalized. Except in this case, Anthe has been used so much, it's hard to tell even with her if she's complacent in all this or if she's for this. It's sad, but somewhere in there the line got erased and it's hard to tell when that happened. There is some sympathy for Anthe. I mean, she does get the snot kicked out of her, and unfortunately she is a prize that has to be won. But knowing this is what's been going on the whole time, to quote Sally Field from Mrs. Doubtfire, the whole time, it's, oh man, it takes a moment to digest that. But Anthe, unfortunately, she's so messed up, it's hard to know what is being manipulated and what is being victimized. And honestly, it's kind of both at the same time. Of all the ways that I've gone back to rewatch the series, it does feel a little implied about Anthe's own personality, to know what was really Anthe and what wasn't Anthe. What was the show? What was the Rose Bride? What wasn't under the control of Akio? Was it all a lie or was it all the truth? Anthe is the catalyst for everything that goes on, and the fact that she is stuck in the most horrible situation, that she normalizes this relationship with her brother. But now the question begs, is it even worth being with the Rose Bride, knowing that this is what lies at the end of the world as a girl that gets manipulated by her brother to the point that everything she does, it's unsure if she truly means it or not, for how messed up she truly is. But then there's Anthe's own catalyst, Akio, who is kind of the reason why we're all here. He is the prince after all, even if he didn't turn out to be the prince that Utena thought that he was going to be. And with the way that he made Anthe the way she is, it is a little alarming. And it does give in to the whole villain arc. In a way, he's a lot like the emperor that Joaquin Phoenix played in Gladiator. Just everything was for power, including siblings. But from a psychological standpoint, the incest does make sense. I just mentioned that Akio has a thirst for power, and Anthe was unfortunately under his whole rule. It's like I mentioned earlier, it's not the first time that we've heard about someone with a zest for power that will rewrite their own code and smudge out things if it means having power. Morality doesn't exist when it comes to power. It's a disgusting thing to know, but the way they depict it, it's not like it's shock value without intelligence. It's very much imbued with intelligence in this one. It's a very odd compliment to have to give, but if this storyline is going to be explored, at least it was explored with a good sense of psychology behind it. Okay, I got that over and done with. Now I can go on to the other part of the Apocalypse Saga that I cannot understand. The cars. This is the one part of the anime I honestly cannot stand. And I literally just went through that most of these characters were doing this Sweet Home Alabama. The cars being introduced into the last arc, it throws me off every time. This is a beautiful idea I was given with this world that has matches reflective upon the motives. And you're gonna throw a car in there? It threw me for a loop. I couldn't get behind it. You give me machines mixed with magic, it can be a no or a go. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But because this anime has a very interesting dry humor behind it, whenever they introduce the car, it is like watching the porno version of the Fast and Furious. The point that makes me want to wonder, I think Fast and Furious would be cleaner than what these guys are doing to their car. When Akio was introduced, despite him being a despicable character, like I mentioned, his obsession with his car is, as much as it's funny, it sticks out in such a stupid way. It is so cheesy, so over the top, so bizarre that it doesn't really give the seriousness that it could. Now, keep in mind, that's just my opinion. If anyone out there that has seen Utena has no problem with it, I'm so glad that you don't have a problem with this, because this constantly throws me off every time to the point that I have to stop after the Black Rose arc because I'm like, okay, this is gonna go one of two ways. The incest or the car. And I choose neither of them. I love this anime, but whenever I have to go through there, this is the path that must be treaded, and I just have to say a couple of Hail Marys and just go, okay, here we go again. The thing I loved about the past two arcs is that whenever they had fights going on with the duelists, everyone had a reflection in that duel, whether it was an item that was present or there was a certain problem going on. And yes, there is a problem going on in the last arc. We are getting near the end of it, and it's getting grosser and disgusting as we're going forward. But now that there's the idea of someone else becoming the Rose Bride and not like what happened in the Black Rose arc, seeing all the Rose Brides go around and around and around and around and around in a car is just throwing me off. I feel like that could just go in a different direction if it wasn't a car. But then also this. I don't understand why Utena doesn't realize that the car she's seeing in these battles is the same car that Akio has. And when she sees it, she's like, oh, I recognize that car. And I'm like, no shit! But ultimately, that was the creator's decision. I guess they were driven to it. So after Utena wrapped up, it was time to give it a movie adaptation. Now the movie, when I got the chance to finally watch it, it was a different experience while being the same experience, is kind of the best way I can put it. All of the psychology, the hidden themes, the other themes, the icky themes, the religious themes, the philosophical themes, they are all present there. But you basically have to do a hard reset and just do like the SpongeBob episode and just empty your mind and do a whole new fresh take on all these characters that you got to know for 39 episodes. So when Utena finally got adapted into a movie in 1999, there was more creative visions behind it. I had mentioned that, unfortunately, being a Yuri anime, they could not go as explicit as they wanted to. Now they can. Except here's the thing. Whereas it's more explicit, we do lose the layering a little bit. In the anime, every one of these characters were gradually layered up in all three of those arcs. But this is an hour and 30-minute movie, including credits. So unfortunately, everything's going to have to be cinched. But that also means the characters are going to have to be cinched down. But I didn't feel that they underwrote the characters. Everyone felt appropriately placed enough that you could have time with everyone that you had time with in those 39 episodes. Utena wasn't too deviated, but I like some of the changes that they did to her. At first, they made her a bit more reserved, and instead they had her be a little bit more flirty. Anthe, on the other hand, wasn't the twisted character and became more of the tragic one caught in the middle, just like it was in the anime. So they just basically took out all the dark stuff and just made her be the victim of all the dark consequences. Which is kind of what she was, but now she's also not the catalyst that fed into the darkness. But then there were other characters that strangely had a redemption or a villain arc. Toga went from being this narcissistic character to being a ghost and more of the princely image that Utena talked about. It was a change, not hating Toga. But then everything changed and I had to hate Shiori, who was all of a sudden with Toga. So it's the weirdness having to marry into this movie, knowing it changed not everything from the anime, but they basically just did fan fiction of their own anime. It's kind of the best way I can say it, where it wasn't too deviated, but there is definitely a difference. I'm not complaining too much about it, but it is a little bit weird knowing that there is a villain version of a character and a non-villain version of a character. There's a twisted version of a character and a non-twisted version of a character. And I had absolutely no complaints about seeing my favorite character, Yuri, being, the most amazing lesbian ever, and god dang, I'm so glad they kept her in there. I do have one complaint, though, about the movie, and this is just a me thing. I hate what they did to Nanami, but I get what they had to do to Nanami. With this being a completely deviated revision of the story, and Toga was a ghost, where's Nanami gonna go? And it's already been established that Nanami isn't Toga's sister, so they basically did to her like what happened to the middle sister on Family Matters. They just kind of had to get rid of her. It killed me seeing that they reduced Nanami to nothing more than her filler episode. The basic death to anime is the treatment that she was given to just be turned into a cow like that one episode. I mentioned how this character had a complete 360 in my mind. She's still going through stuff, but I felt that they gave her a stronger arc, and now she's just a joke. I get that the creators did what they had to do, and I guess they cared enough about Nanami to make her into that weird filler and put it into the movie, kind of like a strange cameo, but it just didn't feel like the right kind of cameo. When I walked into this movie, how they had to cleverly imply things and artistically explain things, it was a bit of a stretch. But then I saw a review that someone made of this movie and compared it to a David Lynch experience. And that, I'm not gonna lie, that helped me get through the movie a lot more, knowing the nonsense is ultimately what makes sense. Utena did thrive on having a very dry kind of humor. And now you're having that dry humor also tell the story. There's a little bit more zaniness. There's a little bit more of a different kind of tone to explain. But this movie moves so fast. It's faster than Sonic the Hedgehog. The better you accept that this is just going to have to be a wild ride, the easier it gets to digest, because the ending was, it was ultimately worth it. It was weird, but it was ultimately worth it. And the one thing I asked myself is, are they going to do the car thing again? And when they did, I was like, no, no. And to make it even weirder, Utena becomes a car. And I'm like sitting there watching the movie going, are you telling me she just became Kit from Knight Rider and this is how it ends? Well, it felt better than the anime. So in my complaint that I had mentioned where it kind of felt things off kilter, now this married magic and machinery better than the anime in my opinion. I absolutely lost my mind the entire time, but that embraced it better than the anime. It was a weird sentence having to say Utena becomes a car, but it was worth it knowing the angle was better.
But having the ending of the movie, I wouldn't say it felt more satisfying than the anime, but it did kind of give the fan service that we wanted. In the end of the anime, not to give me spoilers, it's also implied that Utena is not actually dead, and that Anthe is going to go find her, and they get to have their escape into the real world. In the movie, after Anthe escapes via Utena Knight Rider, they make it through into this desolate wasteland with the others that also want to go to the outside world. And they're together on this little whatever part of there, naked as a jaybird, making out. And I'm like, okay, I'll take it. That's weird, but I feel like the vision was fulfilled.
So here's the way I look at it. There was a Yuri anime that was censored on its Yuri, but then got to have a movie where they didn't have to get censored about the Yuri. That's a success in my book.
Okay, so now that we're on the wind down of this episode,
it goes back to the question I asked myself when I began writing this episode.
Why do people watch Utena? Why not? There are several reasons why this anime has stood the test of time, because it's aged so well.
Not even the icky parts of this anime has been able to sway people away.
It just kind of grew into its own following, and now there's new things to appreciate about Utena year after year after year. The anime has also helped out with a lot of contributions for inspiration, such as Disney shows like Star versus the Forces of Evil, and after I watched that series and found that out, I could see where the connection lied to make Star Butterfly a little bit taking the pages out of Utena Tenjo. It's one of those animes that you can't really see as an anime because of how interesting it is. This is a world where you have the idea of what do you want at the end of it all, or what do you want to be when you grow up. When you go into the future, you never know what it's going to look like, and I feel like Utena gathered a whole lot of those philosophical questions and answered them in their own way.
Ultimately, we have the power for a better world, as Utena showed us, and it's only up to us to do that.
And that is going to be a wrap on the Utena episode, and I appreciate y'all taking the time to listen to the long episodes, but this was definitely needed, and it was fun. It was great, and I really enjoyed getting to talk about animes again. Just gets me going. So now is the time to find out what the next episode is going to be on the Screen Queen. So I got my little box of suggestions, and we're going to find out what the July episode is going to be. So I put some new stuff in here, and I'm going to go ahead and mix it all up in there. And oh, we lost one, but it's okay. This is what happens when you need a bigger box. What are you? Hey. Oh, that's a good laugh. All right. So the next episode on the Screen Queen is going to be another animated pick, and it's our favorite chaotic alien, Invader Zim. Here we go. Oh, that's going to be fun. Oh my god. And that's going to be a little interesting about its history too, but here we are. The show must go on. Anyway, thank y'all for staying patient with the once a month episodes. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. This was a hell of an episode, and I need to get some proper rest. Y'all take care now. Stay safe, amazing, cool. If you want to catch up with me in between uploads, you can find me on my Instagram at the Queen of the Screen. And I also like to advertise my little book series, Inglorious Inc., which is currently under an audio book production, which I'll get some more information when that gets a little bit closer to its due date. But until then, y'all take care and stay amazing. This is your Screen Queen, signing off. Bye-bye!